Our next Joe Gemelli Fleur De Lis Award recipient was Steve's comrade for many years, working on the other side of the street. And even though there's competition amongst people in our business, the predominant feeling amongst most all of us is that we like and respect each other, and I think that was very much the case with Steve and our next recipient. So we'll dim the lights one more time for our second Joe Gemelli Fleur De Lis Award recipient, Bob Parkinson.
Parky, my brother, what can be said that hasn't already been said? Listen, I wish I could turn back the clock sometimes, because our time working together at Channel 4 was the best ever. Never in my life have I worked with a more talented photographer, a more talented storyteller with the camera. As they say, you can make chicken salad out of chicken, you know what. And I've never worked with a guy that's more talented and just more knowledgeable about his craft than you. So it was my honor to vote for you to get this award. Hall of Famer. I'd like to say I'm surprised by that, but it's your destiny. Congratulations, my brother. Real happy for you. Love you. Hope to see you soon. Again, congratulations.
Congratulations, Parky, and I couldn't be happier for you. Being honored by the team that you probably spent more than half of your time in the sports department covering. I would tell people all the time that I would hand you a B- type of script, and by the time you got done editing and adding your flourishes to it, it was an A product. And I want to steal one of your lines that you've used before for somebody else. Bob is a better person than he is a photographer, and he's an exceptional photographer. Congratulations, Parky.
When I first got to Channel 4, I didn't know anyone at the station back in 1989. And in Bob Parkinson, I got an immediate dear friend and the best photographer in the business on day one. Steve, you're awesome. We just never worked together. Bob and I did everything together. We drove back in those days to and from La Crosse, Wisconsin for 10 years, Omaha, Nebraska, Atlanta, Dallas, LSU bowl games. We spent more holidays and time together than we did with our families. Working, laughing, creating memories, and a few stories that are still not shareable. I am so happy that the Saints Hall of Fame is recognizing all of the inductees, and to have my friend Bob Parkinson be honored is so well deserved. Great job, Parky. Congrats.
As we bring the lights back up to present Bob Parkinson, is a gentleman that wears a lot of hats. He's been part of our media selection committee from day one of this entity. Imagine that. He's also one of our recipients of the Joe Gemelli Fleur De Lis Award, richly deserved. He also came to New Orleans in 1978, I think it was, and spent the better part of 3.5 to 4 decades here, serving as the sports director of WWL Television. Of course, he served as the play-by-play voice for the New Orleans Saints in distinguished fashion after initially joining the broadcast as an analyst, and did that in fantastic fashion for many years until he decided he traveled enough. Well, he traveled here today to be with us, and we're very happy that he did, because he's one of the true professionals and one of the icons of our profession. To present Bob Parkinson, please welcome our friend Jim Henderson. Jim.
Thank you, Kenny. Boy, it's great to see so many old friends and so many familiar faces. Among them, the people you just saw, some of my Cubs at Channel 4, Juan Kincaid, Mike Haas, Tom Planchette. We all worked together with this man. We're honored to do so. And they've said so many nice things about him, many of which I was going to say myself. So I'm done. No, you're not going to get rid of me that easily. Like they said, he's a great photographer, he's a great editor, But as much as anything, it was his personality that allowed him to get where he got and to be such a close personal friend of all the people at Channel 4. And there's a lot of pressure in this job. Like they said, you know, you're away from your family a lot. It's lonely being in lacrosse for weeks at a time. And so it's easy to get down on things and to have a bad attitude. I never had a crossword with this man in 18 years, I guess, of working together. I never knew anybody at Channel 4 who felt the same way. The fact that he's going in as an entry with Steve Peretti is so fitting. I mean, they were shoulder to shoulder for so many years on those sidelines. I think of them up in lacrosse. They were really joined at the hip, but if you saw Peretti's hips, it's no real compliment. I mean, the man has more plastic in him than Dolly Parton. And it made for a good afternoon, sometimes morning and afternoon, to be on the sideline up in lacrosse to just see the pranks that Parky had pulled on Peretti in the last 24 hours. It lightened everybody's burden of the day, and I can always hear Peretti saying, "Parkinson, you bastard!" Ed Daniels mentioned about Steve going for receipts. That was one of the great stories of lacrosse as well. You know, you're on expense report, but you got to turn in these receipts. So Steve would shoot the practice in the morning and spend the afternoon scouring the parking lot at Cub Foods for anybody who threw away their receipts. 25 cents, 30 cents, 40 cents, he'd take them all. Parky's sense of humor and his sick, sadistic sense of humor played so well on those sidelines and in the trips we made and in the times that we had together. There was a time up in lacrosse, Chief will probably remember this guy, Sarge. You remember Sarge, the Dean Kleinschmidt brought in? And I won't have this exactly right, but Dean Kleinschmidt, one of the greatest people in Saints history, always revered the old timers. And he knew this guy, I think it was Warren Ariel was his name. And they called him Sarge, and he was like an old drill sergeant. He brought him into camp at lacrosse just to tape some ankles and rev up some old memories, and Dean to tell him how much he appreciated him. So one of Sarge's duties, we stayed in dorms up there, which was just awful in lacrosse. And one of Sarge's duties was to take the air horn in the morning and go to the base of the stairwell and hit this air horn at 6 a.m. to wake everybody up. Well, a lot of the media hadn't gotten to bed yet. Or if they had, they hadn't been in bed long. So he really got under our skin. Well, Parky, he was going to be able to leave camp a little early. So Parky took it upon himself on the way home, and for days thereafter, he'd gotten Sarge's phone number in his dorm room, and Sarge probably went to bed at 8 o'clock at night, so he'd be nice and fresh to wake us up at 6. So Parky thought, turnaround is fair play, so he got his phone number and called him every night at midnight to wake his butt up so he'd know what he had done to us. I was going to tell one more story, and with your permission, Park. There have been so many good things said about you, and I can't really add anything more to it because they're all true. But one of the things Parky and I did for so many years together was to cover Super Bowls and the Masters year after year. Great honor. Well, because we went to all these events, we made a lot of friends with the CBS people that were there to cover it as well. And CBS had a guy by the name of Bob Dries. Bob Dries was head of CBS NewsPath. And what he had to do was go to all the big events, get all the local people's satellite stuff booked for them, take care of any CBS people, the big shots that might be coming on to do the story. And then what he would do is he would take anybody that was covering these events locally, and if they'd done good enough work, he'd send this out on CBS NewsPath to all the CBS affiliates in the country. Well, he got to know Bob and I like to say more Bob than me, and he knew the quality of our work, and so he'd use our stuff day after day after day. So I told him, you use all our stuff. Why don't you hire us for CBS and send us on the road to the Masters and to all these Super Bowls at the expense of CBS, because then it'll look like the people back in New Orleans, like Channel 4 spent all this money to send us, and actually it was CBS. So he bought into that, and we did it year after year after year. Well, Bob Dries was part of all the big events all over the world, not just sports, but news as well, to get people on the air. So we got to know him pretty well, and we were at a Super Bowl in Arizona, and there's a lot of downtime. So we're in Arizona, and we'd done our 6 o'clock shot. We didn't have another shot to do till 10 o'clock at night. We're sitting in the satellite truck, and we said, we've heard some stuff from CBS that you've got a story that is the greatest story ever told. And he said, would you tell it to us? Bob had his camera. We can put it on tape. No, I don't want. I can't do that. I just can't do it. So we stayed on him. He said, all right, I'll tell it. So Parky got his camera out and started rolling. And it started like this. Hello, my name is Bob Dries, and this is the greatest story ever told. It was a road story. Many of us have been on the road. It seems like the craziest things happen on the road. So Bob Dries, in his job at one point, had to go between the American League and the National League baseball playoffs. He'd be in the American League City one day, National League City the next, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So he was covering one of the series that ended one night, and he had to go to the next league the next day to pick up the coverage there. So he said, we'll say it ended in the National League City. He said, National League City, they win that night. There's a big party. You eat and drink and stay out way too late when you're on the road like this on an expense account. He said, I'd been there. The party was hopping. He said, I really didn't want to leave it, but I knew I had to get up early the next day to go to the American League City for baseball. So he said, well, I'll go back to the hotel. He said, I really need to go to the bathroom. But I think I'm just going to enjoy the party, and then I'll take care of things in the morning. There'll be plenty of time. So he goes to his hotel room in the National League City, and he says, well, the next morning I'll get up early and take care of what I have to do. He gets up too late. He's up against it to make his flight, so he throws all his stuff in the bag, jumps in a cab, goes to the airport. He's too late to take care of anything at the airport, too, so now he's holding everything in, and he said, I get on the flight. I'm going to fly to, I guess, maybe Baltimore or somewhere, he said, the next day. I get on the flight, and sure enough, they booked me in a window seat. And the two people right next to me immediately go to sleep. So he said, I can't ask them to get up to go to the bathroom, so I'll just hold it until I get to the terminal. So he holds it till he gets to the terminal. He said, well, who uses the terminal at the airport? Nothing but homeless people and vagrants for the most part. I'll just hold it till I get to my hotel room. So he goes to the hotel room. He checks in at the desk. Bob Dries, yes, Mr. Dries, you're in 618. Here's your key. And Dries says, so here's my identification. Here's my driver's license. And he said, I gotta go really, really bad. So he gets on the elevator, goes up to 6th floor, and goes down to room 618. He said, I'm running down the causeway into my room, loosening my belt. That's how critical it had gotten. So I said, I burst into my room, I run into the bathroom, I take my pants down, I'm sitting there doing what I've been waiting to do for 3 days. He said, I'm just feeling so much better. And he said, I'm sitting there, and I looked over at the wash basin, and he said, oh, this is nice. They've sent us a media gift. It's a little Dob kit with a razor blade and some condiments and things there. So he said, no, it's nice of them to do that. So he's sitting there looking at it, and he said, what else is in here? And he looks around, and he sees other things in the bathroom as well. And he said, oh my God, I'm in somebody else's room. So he says, God, I got to get out of here. So he hurries up, takes care of his business, pulls up his pants, goes to leave, flushes the toilet, and it overflows all over the bathroom and much of the hotel room. And now he's really panicking. He said, this guy could be walking in any minute. He might be asleep in the next room. I never checked. So he goes running down to the desk. And he said, there's been some mistake. It's Bob Dries. You put me in 618. I think I'm supposed to be in 718. And the person at the desk, oh, you're right, Mr. Dries. Yeah, you're in 718. So Dries goes up to his room, and he said, I was so terrified, I spent the rest of the day in my room like Anne Frank, trying to hide from the Nazis. Just thinking that somebody might catch up with him. He said, not only was this bad for me, but he said, I couldn't help but think about the poor guy who comes back to his room, walks in, and it's flooded with everything you can think of internally, and then he's got to go back down to the desk and say, there's a problem, and then the guy that was going to come to the room had to do something. So he said, I'm thinking about that poor guy going back down to the desk and saying, there's a problem in my room, the toilet is overflowed, but I didn't do it. So that's the greatest story ever told. And that's the greatest photography. Thank you. I hope I didn't embarrass too many people. It's great lunchtime conversation, isn't it? This is the absolute greatest guy in the world, the best photographer. He's joined by one as well, in Steve Peretti. I love you, man. I love you. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't have any story quite like that to tell, but it's great to be here. It's great to see so many people here. It's just amazing. Really am just totally thrilled to have gotten this award, and I'd like to thank the Saints organization, Kenny Trahan, and the nominating committee for this fabulous award. I've known Kenny more years than we'd ever like to remember, and you'd be very hard-pressed to find anybody that knows more about local sports than Kenny. I also would never have gotten this award if it weren't for the great people that I worked with over the years, starting with Mr. Henderson. He could have gone anywhere in the country had he wanted to, but he opted to stay here in New Orleans, make it his home. Everyone calls him the wordsmith, and had he left, I wouldn't know the meaning of words like exacerbate and plethora. So I'm very happy that he stayed. Mike Hoss, you saw the video with him. Like he said, we spent more holidays together than we did with our wives. Lee Zurich, everybody knows Lee Zurich. Everybody knows they don't want Lee Zurich knocking on their door because the police are probably coming right after. Juan Kincaid, he's now the sports director over at Channel 8. The producers, you saw Tommy on the screen. Tommy is now like the digital director at Channel 4, which means I don't know what he does. Michael Schaefer, he is now the general manager of Fox 8. And that's Brent Leday and Joe Friesard, who likes to travel all over the world now. So I will tell one story. I guess my most infamous shot that I got was Mike Ditka coming off the field at the end of the, I think it was Cleveland game, and he grabbed his privates to the audience, to the crowd. They were booing him. What had happened was they were winning in the first half, and they got a long pass down, I believe, the 2-yard line. The clock's ticking. One of their assistant coaches yelled for the jumbo package, which is tight ends, 3 tight ends, which they did not have in for this particular game, so they had to take a timeout. Then they got a holding penalty. And then if you remember Chip Lowmiller days, he had a nice chip shot, and he went wide left. So they didn't get any points out of that. They're still leading, and when he walked off the field at halftime, there were some folks up in the stands that weren't too pleased, so he flipped them the bird. Well, a police officer came up to me in the third quarter and said, "Did you get that?" And I go, Get what? He goes, "Well, Ditka flipped off the crowd." I'm like, "No." He goes, "Yeah, he did." Well, they were winning. They ended up losing the game. So I'm thinking, what's he going to do now? So I'm just going to stand by the tunnel and just watch what happens when he comes out. And then the same crowd was booing him. And so, yeah, he grabbed his junk and, and got a $25,000 fine. But I do want to mention Mr. Steve Peretti, a fabulous photographer, and two quick stories about him. One, of course, would have to involve his receipts, as other people have already mentioned. So we are driving to La Crosse. He and I would follow each other up when our schedules would permit. And the year before, let's just say his expense report had a few discrepancies. Let's just say. And so we come to this middle of nowhereville in Illinois, and there's a toll booth. And Steve pulls up first, and I can tell by the toll booth attendant's reaction that Steve has asked for a receipt. And the guy's looking all over his booth, and he finally pulls up this box and blows on it, and this dust cloud erupts. And then he finally opens it up, and I look in the rearview mirror, and there's all these trucks piling up behind us. Some start honking their horn like, come on, let's go, let's go. The guy gets the box open, gets the receipt machine out, and he needs to change the ribbon or the ink, whatever it was in those days. Now the trucks are just wailing on their horns, flipping the bird, everything. Finally, Steve gets his receipt and leaves. I pull up, and the guy goes, do you need a receipt as well? I go, no, I'm not a moron. Here's your 15 cents. That's what the toll was. The other event, maybe you guys don't realize this, but Steven was ahead of his time when it came to diets, and the portion control diet he basically invented. At the time, I called it the bowl diet because he would put his food in a bowl instead of on a plate, figuring the bowl is smaller than a plate. I'll have to put less food in the bowl, and that way I'll lose weight. Unfortunately for him, ice cream fits really good in a bowl. So it's late, the mess hall is closing down. It's just the media table with about 4 or 5 of us, and the training table. All the trainers are eating their dinner. And Steve goes to me, he goes, I'm gonna go get some ice cream, do you want anything? And I said, yeah, can I get a cup of coffee if you don't mind? He goes, sure. So he's coming back, they've mopped the floor. He's got an ice cream bowl the size of Mount Everest, and he hits that wet floor, and he goes flying. No idea where the ice cream ended up, but he's on his back. Our table, of course, just busted out laughing. But fortunately, the trainers could all jump up and make sure that everything was okay with Steve, because he's laying flat on his back. Well, that's not what the trainers did. The trainers were busting out laughing too. And so at some point I said, come on, Steve, my coffee's getting cold. Can you hurry up and get up? And I look over, the trainers are still laughing, but they've all got scorecards. And they've got 2 that have given him a 10. One gives him a 9.5, another one an 8, and some guy gives him a 4 because he didn't stick the landing. And finally, I have to thank the most important person in my life, my wife, Erin, who passed away about a year ago. And I knew this was going to be tough, but she was a huge Saints fan. And this award's for her. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hold it up, Bob, on the camera.
Thank you.
Once again, congratulations to Bob Parkinson. Congratulations to Steve Peretti as well. Give them both another round of applause, if you will.